phones or to wear any listening devices, including earphones. Medically recommended hearing aids are exempt from this rule. But luckily, we have confirmed that none of the candidates is on a hearing aid.
Ethics and guidelines also remind the candidates that they shall not carry to the debate platform any written material, whether books or journals, manifestos, or any articles, including even handwritten notes.
Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, 2 minutes to answer a question, and 60 seconds for a rebuttal. The topics have been carefully selected after a thorough assessment of the state of our nation and the sentiments of the Kenyan voters in various parts of the country.
In line with the debate rules and best practice, the questions we shall be asking tonight have not been shared with any of the campaign teams, neither were they discussed or formulated in conjunction with anyone. The questions we shall be asking tonight are entirely our own.
An invited audience seated here in the auditorium has also agreed to the debate rules. They have been fully briefed that cheers, jeers, or any other form of noise is not permitted during the debate. The audience has also agreed to the request and requirement to maintain order and civility right through this debate.
This debate was to feature two leading presidential candidates, Raila Odinga of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Party and William Ruto of the United Democratic Alliance, UDA. We have, however, received written notification from the Raila Odinga campaign that he shall not be taking part in this debate.
Indeed, but in keeping with the traditions of the Joint Media Presidential Debates Initiative since 2013, the debate is on. And we now make one exception to permit the audience here in the auditorium to help us welcome Dr. William Ruto, the UDA presidential candidate, to the stage.
Your Excellency, Deputy President, Honorable Ruto, thank you very much for honoring Kenyans with this appearance. We shall conduct a series of question and answer, and whose topics have already been shared with you. We'll give you 2 minutes to begin with your opening statement before we go to the main thrust of the questions tonight.
Thank you very much. William Ruto, a husband, to my dear wife Rachel, who is in this audience, a father, to my children who are also joining me this evening in this debate, the sitting Deputy President of Kenya, a presidential candidate in this election, and I have come here to participate in this debate because I have presented myself as a presidential candidate, knowing very well where our country is. We are a country that is faced with mounting challenges. We have a huge track record of what we have achieved, but there is tremendous opportunity out there for more to be achieved. I believe that this is a Mama Mboga moment. We have 5 million young people who are not working. We have 15 million Kenyans who today are blacklisted in CRB. We have 10 million citizens who have no access to credit in the micro and small enterprise sector. And I believe I am the candidate with a plan to be able to get Kenya to the next level.
Thank you, Honorable Ruto, for your opening statement. Let's get right into the first topic of discussion here tonight, and that is the cost of living, something that many Kenyans are concerned about tonight. At the moment, Honorable Ruto, we currently have 3 subsidies in place on fuel, on unga, on fertilizer, all aimed at dealing with the cost of living. Do you believe that subsidies are the way to go and are the right approach at this moment to deal with this issue?
I believe that subsidies can alleviate the problem to an extent, especially when we find ourselves in the situation where we are. My position is that we find ourselves at this port because there are certain things we didn't do right. We had a Big Four plan because we foresaw this situation. We were here in 2017. We decided then that it is proper to formulate a plan that included matters food security. If you look at the 4 pillars of the Big Four plan, one of them was agriculture and food security and nutrition. Unfortunately, that plan fell apart. It was actually sabotaged. So we find ourselves in this space because, one, we didn't capitalize our agricultural sector. We actually removed the fertilizer subsidy program that existed, which we just reinstated, I think, 3 months ago. Why did we withdraw it in the first place? Because to deal with the cost of living, you just have to increase agricultural productivity. And to increase agricultural productivity, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, make sure farmers have access to inputs, fertilizer, seeds, pesticides. Make sure the farmers have the necessary capital to be able to do the farming. And 3, make sure they have access to markets that are not rigged. Unfortunately, we didn't do that, and that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in. So that's why in our plan, as Kenya Kwanza, we have set out with clarity what we need to do. We have put in place a 30 billion revolving fund to make sure that farmers have access to inputs. We have added a 12 billion shilling expenditure on agricultural extension, because it's not just enough to have inputs. It's also important for farmers to use the latest information on how to get our farming right and increase the productivity of every farmer. And the statistics show, with access to fertilizer, with access to certified seed, with access to capital, a farmer who produces 5 bags can produce 15. So we can actually double, if not triple, our agricultural output. What that means is that the 2 million farmers who today are net importers of food themselves can actually produce surplus. And we can make sure that we have sufficient supply that ensures that the prices are reasonable for everybody. So the real solution to the cost of living, especially on matters food, because we all understand the biggest contributor to the high cost of living is the cost of food. The average expenditure of families is 52% of their income. In fact, poorer families spend between 60 and 65% of their income on food. So dealing with the cost of food significantly deals with the challenge of high cost of living.
Honorable Deputy President, if I may just interject, what you say today has also been said by you before. In the first term of your administration, you pledged the same, that you are going to deal with agriculture, you're going to support farmers, and that's when the first fertilizer subsidy was rolled in before it was embroiled in scandal. And you'd also promised the Galana Kulalu project. When you say today that the food security aspect of the Big Four agenda was sabotaged, what exactly do you mean? What failed in the Big Four agenda with regards to food security?
Precisely that. It was sabotaged.
By who and how?
Because you know as well as I do that we never got to implement that plan. Immediately, we changed course, and the whole Big Four plan was shelved. And we went on a tangent because of the handshake equation. We went to handshake, to BBI, and the rest is history. We didn't get the time to do what we had promised the people of Kenya to do. In fact, immediately thereafter, I tried, like has been tradition for me, to support my boss. And many times, I tried to push the Big Four plan to the extent that my boss, the president, asked me that he wanted to do things differently. And he requested that he wanted to assemble a different group of people to help him deliver on what he wanted to be the legacy of the fourth president. And unfortunately, the Big Four suffered a big blow because the whole of that program did not take place.
Galana Kulalu project, Honorable Deputy President, was launched during the first term. What happened? What went wrong? Why did it fail?
The Galana Kulalu project was conceived. In fact, what happened is the first 10,000, the pilot on the first 10,000 program took place. In fact, the first harvest of maize in that program came into being. And the recommendations from the trial on that project was we needed to build a dam because the water from the river was not sufficient to do the Galana Kulalu project. We needed to scale up now and do the dam so that the water that was available, because the soils research and the trials showed that the soils could actually support the production of maize and other cereals. Unfortunately, it didn't move from there because we didn't get the dam sorted. And you know that we had actually 57 dams that we would have wanted to do. Unfortunately, they didn't happen. They suffered.
So why didn't you do the dams, Honorable Deputy President? And the former ambassador of Israel to Kenya also said that they were facing frustration in supporting the Kenyan government on this. Why did you not do the dams? Why did you not go ahead with the implementation of the Galana Kulalu project?
The Galana Kulalu project, as I have told you, was part of a wider plan to make sure that we move our agricultural productivity from rain-fed to irrigation. And it was not just about Galana Kulalu, it was a series of other dams, including what we call the high Grand Fall dams that was supposed to feed into the lower part of the Tana. It was Lowat Dam in Turkana. It was Radat Dam in Baringo. There was a big plan around that was now supposed to roll into place with now our targeted, because our second term was targeted at agricultural productivity and food security. And we had now made it the deliverable for our second term. And as I have told you, our second term program ran into headwinds.
Honorable Ruto, just to continue to understand Galana Kulalu, because that was a big project that, had it have succeeded, might have solved quite a few of the issues we have with respect to food security. The Auditor General conducted a report and cited weaknesses in the contracting of it. First, that there was single sourcing, and that even the manner in which the contract itself was done, in terms of payments that were tied to the contractor. And so raising a number of issues around the manner in which the contract itself was put together, that then states that this was something that was going to fail anyway. And so what's your response to that with respect to the manner in which contracting is done in this country, particularly with Galana Kulalu, which was a big project under the first term of the Jubilee administration, of which you are a part?
I quite agree that issues were raised around the contract, and that is why the contract actually was shelved with a balance. It didn't go the full hog, because when those issues were identified, it led to the contract being stopped so that those issues could be addressed. But by the time it was getting there, already the trials had been done, the pivots had been set up, the first crop had been harvested, and we already had the template on what actually needed to be done, because the contract, the initial contract, was for the first 10,000 acres. The real contract was for the 1 million acres, which was really the target for food production. But as I have told you, that is not the only project we were looking at for food production. And let me also say that even without the implementation of the Galana Kulalu, supporting the farmers as they are today would still guarantee us a situation where we would not be in the situation we are in. Today, for the first time in Kenya, the price of unga has gone to 230 in some cases. It's never been that bad. I must say, as a former Minister for Agriculture, serving under President Kibaki, I am the minister who assembled the infrastructure that provide subsidy on fertilizer. And we saw an increase of 5 million bags of maize when we rolled that plan. When the fertilizer subsidy was cancelled 2 years ago, that is why we are where we are. We are not here because Galana failed. We are here because we didn't do what we needed to do with our farmers the way they are today. What Galana Kulalu was supposed to give us is actually that extra production that would even make it possible for Kenya to export. There is absolutely no reason why Kenya today is spending 12 billion shillings to import maize from Uganda or from Tanzania. We should be net exporters of maize, for example, but we are not. And the reason why we are not is because our agricultural sector is undercapitalized. We have removed the support that farmers always had. And that is why, for the first time, because of the things we didn't do, because of the removal of the fertilizer subsidy, for the first time, the price of unga has gone to 230.
Honorable Deputy President, you say that a lot was done in the first term, and that is why we got to a point where in 2017, we still had a rise in food prices?
In 2017, it was specifically because of drought. And for your information, the prices of flour, maize flour, went to 140. It didn't go to 230. That's the whole difference.
However, then,
even in the situation of drought in 2017, what the debate then was 2-kilogram packet of maize was retailing at 140. Today, it is retailing at 230. Because compounded with the drought, we just did not produce as we should have produced, because we didn't support the farmers the way we have always supported the farmers.
Honorable Ruto, I'd like to speak about another issue that is a contributing factor to the cost of living, and that is the high cost of fuel in the country. What do you propose to do with that? Because there's also a current subsidy in place for that. What do you think is the solution to the rising cost of fuel, which, as you know, drives the cost of a number of other products?
I think the first thing that we need to do is to look at the taxes, because 50% almost of the cost of fuel in Kenya is taxes. I think it's time, as a country, we looked at, I think there are 15 different taxes on fuel. And I think it's time we relooked at how else do we raise revenue.
Which taxes would you be proposing to remove from fuel, the cost of fuel?
I think majority of the taxes that are in that bracket, I think there are almost 15 different taxes that are there. I do not have the specifics, but those 15, I think we need to interrogate these 15 different taxes. Which ones can we put aside so that, like other countries, we can limit the taxation on fuel? Take, for example,
let me
VAT.
ask, yeah, yes, okay,
take, for example, VAT.
Correct.
I think we need to rethink taxation, VAT taxation on fuel. That was the latest inclusion of taxes on fuel. And I think it was very controversial.
Yeah, Honorable Ruto, VAT on petroleum products was indeed controversial. Let me take you back to 2013 when VAT was imposed on this as a condition by IMF. At the time, then Majority Leader Aden Duale said, and I quote, "The 181 members have been convinced by our party leader and our deputy party leader on the rationale of 8% VAT on petroleum products." He went on to say, 181 is a very big number, and we will convince our members from the NASA side. So you, at this point in the year 2015, I believe, when this was passed, were pushing for 8% to be added on VAT. Today, you are saying you want to abolish VAT on petroleum products. Why should Kenyans believe you today?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, we live in a dynamic country, and it's only fools who don't change their mind. If you are in a situation where the price of fuel has gone to 160, I mean, it's time to think. I mean, when this VAT was imposed, then the price of fuel was under 100.
Honorable Ruto, when the VAT was imposed, it was at the time a condition by IMF when we were seeking a precautionary facility. Today we find ourselves in the exact same position with a third tranche of an IMF facility, and once again they are calling for the same issue that we are facing with VAT then is the same one we are facing now. And at the point, IMF has in fact said that we do not need to be removing taxes on petroleum products. So with an IMF facility already in place, are you then saying you are going to go back to the IMF and renegotiate the terms of that loan that is already in place regarding IMF VAT on fuel products?
What's wrong with negotiating with IMF? I think any reasonable government, looking at the situation where we are, looking at the cost of living, and how many Kenyans are every day sinking below the poverty line, I think it takes a courageous government to sit down with our development partners, and they are fairly reasonable people, and have a discussion. And I think they are, if not 8%, we need to renegotiate on some of the items that are outstanding. And apart from looking at that, there are other instruments that we can deploy. For example, we have the fuel subsidy fund. We need to think about how that fund is being used, how we are deploying it. Are we deploying it correctly? Is it giving us value? And what changes can be made? We need an open and frank conversation with our development partners who support us. And to the best of my knowledge, they are not unreasonable. They are reasonable people, and they can entertain a conversation on negotiating some of the terms that have been offered to us.
Honorable Ruto, I think that will take us into our second conversation tonight, and that is on the issue of national debt. And I'd like to pick up just where you left off. You say our partners are open to renegotiation. However, on the matter of renegotiating our debt, Honorable Ruto, you just last week in an interview with the international press said you will not be entertaining discussions around renegotiating our debt. In fact, with respect to your competitor, who is not here with us today, when he brought up the issue, you in fact called his statement on that condescending and reckless. Mr. Deputy President, are you tonight changing your position and saying you will renegotiate and seek to restructure our debt?
Not at all. I still believe, as I stand here, that it is reckless for anybody to say we cannot pay our debts. I believe that we have what it takes to pay our debts. And mark you, what we were discussing about VAT is very different from negotiating our debts.
But it is tied to the IMF facility, which is a loan.
It's completely different.
How so?
What we cannot entertain as a country is a position that we cannot pay. We are in a position that we can't service our debt. We cannot. We need to go out there and renegotiate our debt. I think that would send the wrong signal. What I would do on matters to do with the debt, we have a plan as Kenya Kwanza on how to manage debt. Number one, we have said we will first slow down, put the brakes on borrowing. Number two, we will put brakes on unbudgeted projects. In fact, that is the biggest source of our problem. Projects that are not within the budget, so that we cannot keep our fiscal deficit at what we have committed, 5% or 5.9%. Number three, we need to raise our revenues. And I have said openly that we have areas that we believe that we can raise our revenue. For example, we collect 52% of all collectible VAT. Just by automation and computerization, we can actually raise 95% of all collectible VAT. That would give us an extra 450 billion Kenya shillings. And added on to that, if you raise that kind of VAT, you can equally raise from corporate tax an additional 200, maybe 150 billion shillings. So there is room to raise additional funding, additional revenue for us to manage our debt without necessarily going to say we're going to negotiate our debt.
So I hear you saying that our national debt as it stands today is manageable.
Our debt today is a challenge. We need to deal with it. We are not sitting pretty. We are living, if I may say, we are living beyond our means. And that is why I am saying that we should stop this borrowing spree. Let me give you, in our first term, we borrowed 2.2 trillion. From 2017, our handshake brothers have borrowed 4.2 trillion. That's what's the source of concern. And it's not a source of concern to me. It's a source of concern to Kenyans as well. And it's even a source of concern to our development partners. They are beginning to raise issues about our debt. And more so, the trajectory of continued borrowing. So that's why I'm saying our administration will first slow down on borrowing, remove unbudgeted projects, because that's the biggest incentive, and then go back to raising our own revenue.
Do you have figures that you are targeting? When you say remove unbudgeted projects, how much are we talking about? When you say slow down on borrowing, from what amount to what amount are you talking about?
When you look at our fiscal deficit, all right, there are too many projects that are not in the that are not budgeted for. For example, the Uhuru Gardens Museum. You don't see it anywhere in government budgets, but it's been built. So these are the kind of projects.
Do you know how much?
That,
for example,
in the last financial year, we've spent close to 15 billion in that project.
In the last financial year, Honorable Deputy President,
yes.
Do you know how much of unbudgeted projects we spent?
Actually, unbudgeted projects are in the region of 100 billion. Unbudgeted projects. And that is what is spiraling our borrowing. And I'm saying that our first, and that's why, if you go today to the website of the Ministry of Finance, you will hardly find any paperwork there. You will hardly find any, because there are too many projects that cannot be accounted for, that are being done without a budget line. If you look at the expenditure on contingency fund, which is supposed to spend only up to 5% of the budget, sometimes it goes to 50% of the budget. So that is where we need to apply the brakes. And we are saying clearly, we not only have a plan on slowing down on borrowing, we also have a plan on raising revenue in targeted areas, areas that would give us much more resources to run our budget, number one, and two, to also manage our repayment. And in that particular instance, you may want to know that almost 80% of all our borrowing is actually domestic, which means we are also hurting our own enterprises locally. Access to credit becomes a big challenge. We must think of how we must slow down on borrowing locally and see how we can externalize government borrowing. And it doesn't have to be borrowing. Some of the programs, we must get the stock exchange to take up some of the areas of raising revenue. The stock exchange is a wonderful instrument. We saw it when we were selling the shares of Safaricom. Safaricom was looking for 50 billion. They got 250 billion. It tells you there is a lot of money out there. If we used different instruments, how do we use the different instruments of raising capital for long-term investment using the instruments we have, revenue, and using the stock exchange? So these are avenues that are available for us to be able to take our development forward and minimize on borrowing.
Honorable Ruto, while we stay on the issue of national debt for a moment, for decades, the Treasury has refused to make public contracts that have been signed with some of our lenders like the Exim Bank of China or the China Development Bank. You've been part of a government that has refused to make this information public. Why?
Those contracts and agreements, in accordance with the Constitution, are public documents. And the public have a right to know and to have access to that information. The fact that that information is not being made public is against the Constitution. So, under
yet,
the
Mr.
Kenya
Deputy
Kwanza
President,
administration,
you have not. This is something that you could do. You are the Deputy President of this republic. Is this not something you could do or make happen?
when you are Deputy President, I'm sorry you've not been one, you would understand to what extent you can do things. And let me give you an example. Many people did not see the mettle of Mwai Kibaki until he was president. When he became president, he made a sterling job of being president. All along, everybody thought he was a lackluster performer. I am undertaking to the people of Kenya that given a chance to be president, things will be different in Kenya.
So let me ask this just one more time. You are the sitting deputy president of this. You say this should have happened constitutionally, but it did not. Was this not something that came up in cabinet meetings that at least we've not seen you protest about this particular matter? Because debt transparency and debt, what we owe and who we are paying is something that taxpayers should know. So if you are saying this is something that should have happened but didn't, why would Kenyans believe you when you say that this is something you will do if elected president?
Because I have never been president before. This is the first time I'm vying to be president. And this is the first time I will occupy the high office of president. This is when the buck will stop with me.
Are you saying, Mr. Deputy President, that in the last 9 years, you have sat in cabinet meetings and expressly said that you would like the contracts details to be released to the public?
I will not tell you whatever discussions took place in cabinet because...
What we are seeking to understand, Your Excellency,
because
is what role you played
it is not in my
making
case.
sure that the government that you serve is actually adhering to the Constitution and several court orders.
Whenever it was available for me to take a position, I have always taken a position. And I have taken many positions. Sometimes that did not look very popular, if you may. And I have taken very firm positions in cabinet. And I have taken very firm positions in the public. And I think people of Kenya know me not as a coward. They know that I take what I believe in, and I take positions. I am saying here that every contract signed by the government of Kenya is a public document, and it should be available to the public.
The question of the SGR contract was raised even in the first term of your administration. It has never been made public. Mr. Deputy President, you don't have any record, any public record of you saying that these contracts should be made public. Why?
You see, as Deputy President, there is so much that you can do. In fact, My role, my oath of office has 4 functions. Number 1, I swear allegiance to the people of Kenya and to the Republic, to discharge every responsibility given to me by the Constitution and the law. And number 3, to advise whenever required. That's the language of the Constitution. Whenever required, the President on matters that he requires advice. And number 4 is to serve people equally and fairly. So I have discharged that responsibility to the best of my ability. And I have made my position in regard to the contracts very well known to the right officers. It is not a matter I would have wanted to take it in public for purposes of making sure that government is functional.
All right, I have just one last question on this before we move to our next topic of discussion, because you've informed us about, from what I understand, and you can correct me, Honorable Ruto, about the limited sort of powers of the Deputy President. Is that what you're saying in respect to making these contracts public? You said, and I quote, "I can only do so much as a Deputy President."
Absolutely.
Okay. However, in previous television interviews, you have stated that you and the President remain accountable for everything that has been done for this. So which is it, Mr. Deputy President? Are you responsible for not making these contracts public? Because you in the past have said that you and the President remain accountable and should be asked about everything that happens in this country.
Precisely, that's why you're asking me, and I have answered you. I have said clearly that to the extent that my duty as Deputy President is concerned, I have discharged my responsibility. I have given advice to my boss on many issues, including that particular issue. So I have given him my advice, enumerating very well that it is the constitutional position that every contract is made public. I have given that advice to the President as is required of me. So, but you know the buck stops with the boss.
Honorable Deputy President, let's now move to the next topic of our conversation this evening, and this will be on the matter of national security. You were recently in Elgeyo-Marakwet County, where you promised the people of Kerio Valley that you would do everything in your power to secure them. You've also been visiting other parts of this country, Marsabit, Baringo, Samburu, Laikipia, West Pokot. More than 300 people have died in the last 7 months alone in this country, killed by armed bandits. Livelihoods are lost. Children have not gone to school. Children have been killed. Kerio Valley residents have even petitioned the UN Secretary General, saying that their government has failed to provide them with security. In your manifesto, you say that security is a cornerstone of protecting people's livelihoods. Why has the government of Kenya, in which you've served as an assistant minister, as a minister, as a deputy president, been unable to secure the people of these counties?
I quite agree with the feeling of many Kenyans. In fact, it's yesterday. It's not even last week. It's yesterday. I was in Elgeyo-Marakwet, and one of the leaders there told us we have buried 114 people in that neighborhood. So it is indeed a live and serious matter. You have seen me in when we came into office in 2016. I called all the leaders from Baringo, Elgeyo-Marakwet, Pokot, Samburu, and we had a serious leaders meeting in my office in Karen. And because of that meeting, for about 3 years, we went round, we mobilized all the governors, and we provided National Police Reserve in all those areas. And the situation was under control. But when we came into the handshake arrangement, a false narrative, very unfortunate false narrative, was rolled out that, oh, all these National Police Reservists in Elgeyo Marakwet, in Baringo, in West Pokot, were actually a militia that William Ruto would use at some point. And all the National Police Reserve were withdrawn. A very reckless act. And with the withdrawal of the National Police Reserve, the situation went south. And that is why I was saying yesterday in Elgeyo Marakwet that we will do whatever it takes. And today, there is a program to build security outposts. And I'm saying, whatever it takes, even if it means bringing the military and military installations to support the police in some of these areas. In fact, you just reminded me, yesterday I overflew a huge tract of land where 3 years ago I was standing there and it was all maize. Yesterday, they haven't planted there for the last 3 years because of insecurity. So insecurity is not only causing our children not to be in school, it is causing starvation, it is causing death. Yet, people want to treat it casually.
But Honorable
let me
Deputy
tell you,
President,
let me just allow
in
me
the
to-
last 3 years, Mr. Deputy President, you have not spoken out about the issue in Kerio Valley. You have not said anything about the killings that have been taking place, like they told you, 150 people buried this year. You spoke about it only yesterday. Where have you been in the last 7
I have
months?
always been there. In fact, if you go and ask those people in those regions, I have always been present. We have buried many of those people with our own money. We've taken many of those people to hospital with our own money. I have deployed my personal resources to deal with that situation because I know it was a political political agenda. You know, the withdrawal of the National Police Reserve was really an unfortunate act. But because it was intended to punish William Ruto, you know, never mind that many people lost their lives, is a real tragedy. But that is the nature of our politics in Kenya.
Honorable Ruto,
Unfortunately.
Honorable Ruto, you're saying that was done to punish you?
What other explanation would you have? You go withdraw security personnel in the whole of that whole region, you know, you subject people to...
How would that punish you, Honorable Ruto?
Because I am the one who had led the whole, in fact, I am the one who had taken charge. In fact, I was there every 2 weeks in that region. I was there every 2 weeks. I am the one who mobilized the resources. I am the one who mobilized the security men, the identification of the National Police Service. And so it looked like it was
Honorable Ruto,
about
help me
me.
understand.
It was never about me.
Did you mobilize those resources on a personal basis or as Deputy President?
As Deputy President.
So why would your government punish the Deputy President?
You live in Kenya, my good friends.
And I am failing to understand it, sir.
And you know...
Are you telling the people of Kerio Valley that 150 of them have been buried this year alone just because a government is punishing the Deputy President?
Not just that. The Kimwarer and the Aror dams were cancelled intentionally to punish my supporters. That's it.
We will come to that, sir. You, as the Deputy President, consume intelligence reports. Tell us, over the last 30 years, what is it that has led to this continuous cycle of violence in Kerio Valley, in Baringo, in Samburu, in West Pokot, even going as far as Marsabit County? What causes this, and what will you do, knowing the intelligence that you have?
The biggest contributor to the situation we have in those regions is competition for resources, competition for water, competition for pasture, general matters of education, and precisely the reason why we had a plan on Radat Dam to provide the water for the whole of that belt. Aror, Kimwarer, Lowat. These are dams that my thinking was, if we provide water in these areas, we can sufficiently roll out irrigation. For your information, that whole Kerio belt where people are fighting, it is a granary. We have the best mangoes from that region. We have very good soya that can be grown in that region. The only impediment is water, access to water. And there are enough rivers to be tapped. My solution to the whole of that region is twofold. Let us provide water for livestock. Let us provide water for irrigation. And let us get schools developed, as well as making sure that we provide road infrastructure. That's why we rolled out the road from Parbelo, cutting across that region, to come out on the other side in a place called Marich Pass, through Tot, through Jesongoch, and now there was also the road that was supposed to connect Kapedo from the other side of Turkana coming to Nakuru. Opening up that area is the solution. Opening up that area in terms of infrastructure and opening up that area in terms of water infrastructure will provide the solution. Unfortunately, there are people who don't see it that way.
So you say that the Aror Kimorer Dam, you've recently said that you are going to complete it should you be elected president.
Yes.
Why did it fail?
I will. Yes, I will. It didn't fail. It was meant to fail. I mean, let me tell you.
As the deputy president, sorry, sir, to just interject. As a deputy president, and like I started by saying, you've been minister before, you've been an assistant minister, we are talking about violence that has been taking place for decades, not just in the term that you've been deputy president. So this is not about you being punished now, unless you're telling us that for a long time, there are people that have been scheming to punish William Ruto by killing the people of Kerio Valley.
That's not what I'm saying. I am saying we had a solution. We had close to 5,000 National Police Reserve. In fact, we have, we'd even moved a step forward to provide armored vehicles to make sure that we can follow whoever these criminals are, right? We had a plan. Unfortunately, that plan was frustrated. And you know, the plan was, let's provide a National Police Reserve. Then, let us construct the roads. Then, let's provide water infrastructure. And then, let's provide school infrastructure. That way, you ease out people from that situation where they are today to a new environment where they appreciate education, they have food to eat, their animals have water and pasture, and then you can develop that region. In fact, in my mind, that's where the future of Kenya is, because we have huge tracts of land in that region. And the fact that people have been fighting in that region forever doesn't mean that they should continue fighting. We should find a solution.
Honorable Ruto, let's go back to the issue of water, and you've mentioned the Kimorer and Aror dams. And you say that as well was cancelled to punish you?
That was cancelled for political reasons.
For political reasons. Well, some of the allegations that have been made, by the DPP in court is that payments were made contrary to the law. They were not processed through the consolidated fund. That in fact, this was all done to ensure that there were kickbacks, that the government made advance payments, including 11 billion shillings in excess of unnecessary debt to, this is what they're saying, which prosecutors say were to go to, friends and co-conspirators of this scheme. If this is what you allege, are you alleging tonight, Honorable Ruto, that there is a big conspiracy between the DPP, between the courts, and also politically with respect to the Aror and Kimwarer dams that are now in court?
For your information, Aror and Kimwarer were signed at the same time with other government projects, signed by the same companies, funded by the same financiers, and they were signed not with me, witnessed by the President of Kenya. So these are not projects that were cooked at night or in some dark corner, right? How come that the only projects that did not go through is Aror and Kimwarer? All the others went through. That's number one. Number two, today, the government of Kenya is in court because the contractor, with all those allegations that have been made, the contractor has gone to court to demand payment of another 12 billion shillings. I mean, that should concern everybody.
There are also suspects in court, Honorable Ruto.
Pardon?
There are also local suspects in court over the matter.
Forget about the court matter here. The contractors are in court in London, and the government of Kenya is already replying to the case in court. And they cannot afford to make it public because it's embarrassing. Why did the contractor not continue with the project? Because he was denied the land where to set up the dam. And that was an undertaking by the government of Kenya, that we're giving you a contract, we're going to give you land, we're going to give you this infrastructure for you to build the dam. And the reason given then was that, the dam was going to be in a forest. How many dams are in the forest? We have Yamo Dam in the forest. We have many other dams in the forest. So I think, we have to be honest with ourselves. And that's why I am looking forward to the day somebody will step forward and actually tell the country, how will the government of Kenya lose 20 billion shillings that was supposed to build Aror and Kimwarer, and yet there is nothing on the ground? What was this? What was this sinister motive?
Do you believe money was lost?
I don't believe any money was lost. And even if money was lost, people should be taken to court.
But you said around 2019 that it was 7 billion shillings that was lost.
No,
and not
I
the
didn't
21
say that.
that was being alleged by the DPP.
I didn't say that. Check my statement. I am very clear about what I said. I said 7 billion shillings was paid. Right? That's what I said. And for your information, I said that 7 billion shillings that was paid was actually insured. The reason we should be asking is, why hasn't the person, the company who insured that money, why haven't they been asked to pay? Because the company that insured that 7 billion is a well-connected company. That's why the demand letter has not been put to them.
So what you're alleging...
And you see, Kenyans will one day really marvel at what really happened in this Kimwarer and Aror Dam. You will be shocked.
Tell us what really happened, because what it sounds like is you're alleging the investigating authorities, the DPP, the courts. There are suspects in court at the time, including former Cabinet Secretary Rotich, who I believe was charged afresh a couple of months ago over this issue. If this is all politically instigated, are you then saying that all of these authorities, different arms of government, are conspiring against you, from investigators to the DPP to the courts, to punish you, Honorable Ruto?
Let me ask you, that matter has now been in court for 4 years. It has not moved an inch. It's been dancing. You know, this person, today you're being charged, tomorrow, no, remove this person, the next day, remove this person, the next day, change the charges, because somebody is actually waiting for another government to come and carry the shit, unfortunately. And that's what's going to happen. That's why that case has never moved an inch. Mention after story after story. I mean, surely, how can we lose 7 billion, another 12 billion that is going to be incurred by this government? And it's an act of political convenience.
You just said we didn't lose 7 billion.
No, I'm just saying, eventually we will. I mean, if it is not sorted out. And that's why I'm saying, when I come into office, I will make sure that the money is not lost. And I will make sure that the impediment imposed on this project, we will provide the land. The contractor will build the dam, and we will move ahead.
To conclude the matter of national security, I think we'll also touch on constitutional implementation here. Over the last 9 years, Deputy President, you have been chairing the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. The Constitution establishes, under Article 204, the Equalization Fund, which was meant to fast-track development in some of these marginalized areas, the ones we've been talking about, and many others, to help them with water, roads, health, education projects. Why has this fund never been operationalized?
Two things. My chairmanship of the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council extends to a limit. The issue you have raised about Equalization Fund is actually in the ambit of the summit, which is chaired by somebody else, right? As chairman of the Intergovernmental Economic and Budget Council, in fact, governors listening to me today, they know that we did a perfect job, especially when it came to transfer of functions, a function that was supposed to take 3 years. We made sure that we worked day and night because we wanted to get devolution rooted and moving. We completed that exercise in a record 1 year instead of 3 years. We have since worked with county governments, and many of the governors will tell you that I have provided leadership as chair of the council on every matter, whether it was grants, whether it was matters to do with conditional grants, whether it was making sure that there is a balance between what goes to national government and what goes to county governments. The whole of that trajectory, whether the issues to do with settling matters with the former local government authorities, assets, liabilities, I have been working on that with many governors, and we have made tremendous progress, including the final one that we concluded the other day, where counties now, as entities, can borrow money. As entities, like Laikipia County is the first that is going to have the leverage to borrow money. So I have a track record on what I have done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman of IBEC. Now let me ask the question to the Deputy President. Why has the Equalization Fund never been operationalized 12 years after the promulgation of the Constitution?
The Equalization Fund, window. As Deputy President I can answer, the Equalization Fund, halfway through, there was a big argument between who will implement this Equalization Fund, because it was under the national government. The counties argued that because there are 14 listed counties to benefit from this fund, why don't we give this money to the counties? Then there was a problem of trying to get the regulations on how this fund would work out. And it dragged on the contestation as to, and some projects were implemented, some water projects were implemented, some road projects were implemented. But the argument continues to be who should. At some point, the law was actually changed to include counties beyond the 14. And that became another big argument. And I accept that we should have done better on the equalization fund. And that is why I have made a commitment in our manifesto that that equalization fund, whatever the balance of the time that is left, we will make sure that we devolve it to counties. In my belief, the counties are better placed to run that fund than the national government.
Thank you, Honorable Ruto. I'd like us to move to the next topic of discussion here tonight, and that is constitution and governance. 13 years since the adoption of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, citizens continue to complain about non-effective implementation and a weak culture of constitutionalism. Honorable Ruto, which part of the Constitution of Kenya do you think has not been implemented with fidelity, and why?
I think we should sort out the two-third gender rule. I think we owe it to the people of Kenya, and especially to the women of Kenya, that this part of the Constitution is implemented. I believe that we need to sort out certain matters to do with devolution, like the one I have said, the equalization fund. I think it was wrongly put under national government. It should go to the counties. I also believe that there are functions that should not have been made contingent or shared functions between the national government and the county government. Regional authorities, for example. Mm-hmm. Those are functions that we should either agree to be managed by counties jointly or to be subsumed into county governments. If it is Kerio Valley, how do we split it so that the counties in the Kerio Valley we have a Kerio Valley Development Authority. Should that be managed by the national government? I don't think so. I think it should be managed by the counties in the Kerio Valley. So these are some of the functions that I think we need to clarify. We need to complete the implementation of the Constitution. I have raised, for example, the matter of the Judiciary Fund. I think we have wasted too much time in implementing the Judiciary Fund. After I pushed so hard, this year, 1st of July, the Judiciary Fund was operationalized because I have been talking about it for the last year and a half. So these are some of the sections that I believe that we should be able to conclude the implementation of the Constitution.
Let's go back to the two-thirds gender principle. In your view, why did we fail in terms of getting this since 2010?
I think, speaking for myself, I have made a commitment, and I know it's doable, to make sure the two-thirds gender rule is realized. There are different proposals. There are proposals that require constitutional change. There are some that do not require constitutional change. And I have assembled a team of very competent constitutional lawyers to look at how we can have a framework in 90 days of our government, and within 1 year, make sure it is implemented. And it's not necessarily for purposes of the women of Kenya. It is for the benefit of everybody. the fact that we do not have as many women leaders is actually a negative for us. There is something we are losing. The women leadership component that is not in our arithmetic is actually taking away from us. I believe that having women leaders would actually enrich our governance and our leadership as a nation. And that's why, for example, when these matters came up in the BBI discussion, I vehemently opposed the fact that women were being removed from the National Assembly, where the substantive financial issues are being decided, and they were being relegated to the Senate. So I was wondering how a right that had been given to the women of Kenya in the National Assembly could be withdrawn, and they are hoarded into the Senate. So that is my commitment to the women of Kenya.
Also, on the Judiciary Fund that you've mentioned, you said you will operationalize it. But the judiciary is, by dint of the Constitution of Kenya, independent. So what is this exactly that you will do that operationalizes this fund?
You see, independence can be undermined by financial resources. The reason why the judiciary has been raising this issue over and over is because, much as they have their independence, their financial requirements are still subject to other pieces of legislation, which is against the Constitution. The Judiciary Fund is supposed to draw resources directly from the Consolidated Fund. Once approved by Parliament, that should be it. And in fact, because of the push that I have had on the Judiciary Fund for the last 1.5 years, it was actually operationalized in June.
So you do have some influence, Honorable Ruto, within this government.
If you look at, I have been pushing in the public, because that's what I said. When I said I'm going to set up the Judiciary Fund, I think somebody decided to say, this fellow is pushing too hard. Let us implement this Judiciary Fund so that he loses this card. He cannot take it to the people of Kenya.
So you do have some influence.
We have achieved it anyway.
So you have some influence, Honorable Ruto? Because previously, in this conversation... Of course I have influence. But in this conversation previously, you have said there's limits to what the Deputy President can do.
I have influence nationally on pushing agendas. I may not have...
Such as disclosure of SGR
as Deputy President. I didn't push the Judiciary Fund as Deputy President. I pushed it as a leader.
Why couldn't you do that then for a number of the other issues that we have discussed here tonight that you have said you did not have influence over?
I have pushed back, for example, on the issue of the BBI. I pushed back heavily, and I deployed a lot of influence. And actually, by God's grace, we managed to stall it. Our competitors are saying they are going to go back to it immediately after the election. But I think it was a complete waste of resources, and it was actually not made in good faith, because a constitutional change that seeks to undermine the independence of the judiciary is a dangerous constitutional change. A constitutional change that seeks to subsume the executive and the legislature and take us back to where we were in the Nyayo days is actually taking us back, not taking us forward. And that is why I made my position very clear in the public domain.
Honorable Ruto, do you believe in the independence of the judiciary?
Pardon?
Do you believe in the independence of the judiciary?
I don't know how to answer you. In fact, if there is one person who has fought for the independence of the judiciary, it is William Ruto. I am the only person with a few of my friends who stood up to the so-called ombudsman that was supposed to be injected into the judiciary, appointed by the executive, to supervise the judiciary, something I totally disagree with.
You talk about you being the biggest defender. However, the administration which you have served since 2013 has been cited several times for disobeying court orders. Let me give you one example, or a few. Former Air Force commander waiting for 6 years to be restored to his rank and given 71 million shillings compensation. NYS service official injured in the line of duty, yet to receive 3.6 million shillings by the courts. There is a number of those, including the matter involving the swearing in of judges. This is an administration in which you sit. In fact, former Chief Justice David Maraga has often lamented the executive's disregard of court orders. You are the second in command of the executive and of the Republic of Kenya. What are your thoughts then around the independence of the judiciary, and why have there been so many court orders disobeyed under your watch as Deputy President?
Two things. I am an ardent believer in the independence of the judiciary. When the judiciary issued a ruling nullifying our election, I went out of my way to persuade my boss for us to go back and do the election again. Because much as we criticized that judgment, because we believed that we had won that election fair and square, but because of our commitment and belief in the judiciary, we still obeyed the dictates of the judiciary. That's one. You have raised incidences where, of course, judgments have been entered against government and they have not been sorted out. And I quite agree. And in fact, that was one area we identified even as we developed our manifesto. If you look at our manifesto, we have squarely identified that as an issue, that we cannot continue this situation where government leads in disobeying orders.
Honorable Ruto, yes, that's indeed a good matter for me to interject. Just hang on one second, Honorable Ruto. Yet you have sat in that administration which has defied court orders. We haven't heard you raise issue on that. And in fact, now that you brought up the 2017 Supreme Court petition, you were rather unhappy with the Supreme Court judges. You called them those 6 people. You called them wakora. Does that demonstrate respect for the judiciary?
In fact, I had occasion to have a one-on-one with Maraga. And I told Maraga an incident when I first came into Parliament. I met Paul Muite, a seasoned lawyer and a legislator, and he told me this, which has really stuck in my mind. He told me, young man, when I first became a member of Parliament in 1997, 98 actually. So he told me, when you support a government, it also includes criticizing that government when it goes wrong. So part of supporting a system is pointing out when you think they are not doing the right thing.
Criticizing them is one thing, Honorable Ruto, but calling them wakora, which means conmen? Do you believe that the Supreme Court judges of 2017 were conmen and women? I
would want to understand in what context that wakora thing you have mentioned, because I have, if there is any respect for the judiciary, is to comply with the decision of the court. Did we comply with the decision of the court? Yes. We went back to the election.
But you haven't in many of the other court orders that we have cited here tonight.
We went back to the election. And the admission that the fact that there are so many outstanding issues, and the fact that I have singled them out, and they are part of what I intend to sort out, is actually halfway the solution. I don't think if you look at the manifesto of our competitors, they have recognized that as an issue. I have recognized that as an issue because I believe in the independence of the judiciary. I believe government should lead from the front in obeying court orders. And in fact, we have said in our manifesto, if you read it clearly, it says we will look at all judgments that have been entered against government. And we will develop a mechanism to make sure that within 1 year, we comply with all judgments entered against government so that even as we drive the country to obey court orders, we lead as government from the front.
Let's talk about something else, Mr. Deputy President, and this is with regards to leadership and integrity. Your opponent, who did not turn up tonight, said he could not come to this debate because he did not want to face a man who has no regard for ethics, public morals, or shame. How do you respond to that?
Do you sincerely believe that that is the reason why he's not here? I don't think so. I don't think so. My competitor is not here because he doesn't have a plan. He doesn't have an agenda. He cannot articulate anything to the people of Kenya. That's why he's not here. Secondly, my competitor is not here because he doesn't want to answer difficult questions. You know, he's been part of this administration, the handshake administration, for the last 5 years. KEMS happened, and many other things happened. In fact, my competitor could not come here because he's not the real candidate. He's a project.
At this moment, Honorable Ruto, just one moment, just to remind our members of the audience that they agreed to abide by the rules of the debate, and that involves no cheers, no jeers, no noise. Honorable Ruto, I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please carry on.
Sorry. So, I mean, that's the reason. So these are just scapegoats. You know, he's dodging difficult questions. He doesn't want to answer. His allies, the handshake allies,
Mr. Deputy President, there are expectations that are laid out in the Constitution and in law with regards to the character and the values that a leader should have. Do you think when you go out in public campaigns and you use terms to describe your fellow leaders, that demonstrates you as somebody with great values, fit for leadership?
I have tremendous respect for all Kenyans and all Kenyan leaders. I have not in any way undermined the public standing of any leader or any person or any Kenyan for that matter. I have not called anybody washenzi. I have not called anybody takataka. I'm just a...
Kitendawili?
Huh?
Kitendawili?
I mean, is kitendawili an insult?
Ganga?
Huh? I think we have all come to understand what kitendawili means.
Mr. Deputy President, there's public perception that associates you with a rather good appetite for acquisition of property, particularly land. And this has been mentioned many times. Questionable acquisition of land, this has been said publicly, Taita Taveta, in Transmara, the former Vice President's house, the late Joseph Murumbi, and others. In fact, there was a conviction in court with regards to 100 acres of land that you were ordered to surrender back to its rightful owner and also pay some reparations. Does this public perception affect you?
For your information, that's why I am proposing in our manifesto to deal firmly and squarely, institutionally, with a fight against corruption. Because allegations are made, left, right, and center. any piece of land that I have is legally acquired. In fact, I think we need to discuss the Muteshi land. You've talked about the 100 acres. I was a victim of fraudulent sellers of that land. What the court ordered me to do was to pay for the 3 years I had occupied the land. And they calculated and said the income from this land would be approximately 5 million shillings for 3 years. And that's what I paid. The people who sold the land to me were taken to court for fraudulently selling the piece of land to me. Those people are in court. The
Mr. Deputy President, my question was, all these allegations.
Taveta land issue.
There was that, there's a Taveta, there's Western Hotel, there's Transmara. As a person,
yes.
As a person, what does this make you feel when you hear that there's all this public perception about you and irregular acquisition of land?
You see, acquisition of property is a legitimate endeavor. How you acquire it, if it is legitimate, you've paid value for it, and I want to tell you, I have paid value for any property that I have. Maybe the whole story is like everything else that has been said, and all manner of allegations have been raised about many people, you know. My competitor, Dominion land has been mentioned about him, Molasses land, so many other pieces of land. Does that make you guilty? Not at all. I think the presumption of innocence and the fact that I can stand up to scrutiny. And for your information, I am probably the politician in Kenya that has been audited, left, right, upside down, inside out, on any matter, you know? And maybe because I have raised my head beyond what many people think I should. If I was a quiet business person, I am sure I wouldn't attract the same kind of labeling that I've been subjected to.
How much is enough?
Enough is enough.
Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, we'd like to conclude this conversation with the election preparation. We're just 2 weeks away to the August 9th general election. You've previously said that, yes, you are willing and ready to accept the outcome of the election. Are there any circumstances under which you will not accept the outcome of the election? For a minute.
Accepting the outcome of the election includes going to court if you have an issue with the results. That's accepting the outcome of the election. Okay, you say my competitor has won. I have a doubt, and I will go to court. Why I made that deliberate statement is because we have had a situation in Kenya where every other election we foment a crisis around refusing to accept the outcome of election. And it has cost us lives, property, and many other things. And I needed to be on record, and which I am, that I will accept the outcome of this election. I know that the people of Kenya will make a choice. If it is me, I will prepare to govern the country on day one. If it is not me, I will accept that my competitor has won. If I have any issue, I will go to court and accept the outcome of the court.
Honorable Ruto, we've come to the end of this conversation tonight. We would like to give you 2 minutes to give us your closing statement tonight.
I think it is very important for us to look at this election against what is the competition. Our competitors have run away from this debate in total contempt to the people of Kenya, because it's not William Ruto who is going to make this choice. It is the people of Kenya that we are speaking to. They have very little regard for the people of Kenya. They think the deep state is going to make the decision. They think that the system is going to make the decision. I want to tell the people of Kenya tonight that they are the ones who will make the decision on the 9th of August. Their vote is what will make the next government happen. And I want to encourage them to disregard the propaganda, the mobilization of chiefs and all these people and the provincial administration and the whole of this contempt and madharau, and tell them, tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 wa Kenya, ninyi ndio mtaamua serikali ambayo inakuja. Na mimi nawaambia, serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itapunguza gharama ya maisha, tutahakikisha kwamba watoto wetu milioni 5 wako na ajira, tutahakikisha kwamba kila mmoja wetu anaweza kwenda hospitali na kuwe na bima ya afya, na tunaweza pia tutahakikisha kwamba kuna maji na watoto wetu wanasoma. Tuko na mpango. Tarehe 9 mwezi wa 8 waamuke, wapige kura, watengeneze serikali, tuende mbele pamoja.
Shukran sana, Mr. Deputy President. Honorable Dr. William Ruto, thank you for making the time for us tonight.
Thank you very much.
That's right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and the viewers here in the audience, following this at home, and of course those here as well, we have to end it here for now. Our appreciation to Dr. William Ruto of the United Democratic Alliance for honoring voters with this duty to a public televised national debate. We thank you again.
And indeed, that marks the end of the 2022 Joint Media Presidential Debate Series. The next presidential debate shall come to you without fail, and inshallah, in July 2027, at a date to be announced by the Joint Media Presidential Debate Secretariat. We thank you for watching. My name is Eric Latif of Spice FM and KTN News.
And I'm Yvonne Okwara of Citizen Television. Good night.